And welcome back to Open Your Eyes. We're about to venture off into our second segment for the morning. Now, this one very close to us as well. Wildlife Conservation Society and Jaguar Conservation. In with us, we've got Lee Mcloughin, who is a technical coordinator, Wildlife Conservation Society, and also Yamira Novelo, technical assistant, Wildlife Conservation Society. Guys, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you guys in. Now, we know how important wildlife is to a country. People come to a country to see our wildlife. But there've been some really nasty photos out there of what people are actually doing to our wildlife. And it touches home for us, because we know the flora and fauna of our country is very important. Now let's jump on into wildlife and how is it in terms of taking care of things? We surely will get into the jaguars, but I want to know about the wildlife and how, if it's flourishing or if we're getting rid of it.
Well, wildlife needs a place to live. This is the thing I always go back to. Belize has a lot of forest still, relatively to its neighbors, Guatemala, Honduras. We have just under 60% of forests, which means there's still a lot of places for wildlife to live. But if the forest declines, the wildlife declines. So for me, once we still have forest, we're still going to have healthy wildlife populations. So that's the absolute key and fundamental point.
And development is consistently one of the greatest threats for the wildlife that we're so proud of. Tell me some of the indicators that you've seen over time where you see that there's an impact in our own development and what you're seeing with the wildlife populations in Belize.
Well, one of the indicators we usually first see is damage to our river systems. Especially if you have development close to those systems, you'll first see those, and then so you'll have your freshwater species within your river system that is usually first impacted.
Yeah.
Aside from that, you will begin to have some not native species coming into country, like in the northern Belize. I could recall some few years ago when I was working with the University of Belize doing some camera traps with jaguars, we got some sightings of coyotes. Coyotes is an indicator that we're losing our forests because they need space or they like clearing. So having a coyote come up on a camera trap was very, daunting to us that, okay, something's going on. We're clearing more than we should, or we're bringing in something that is not native to us. And a lot of people did not know that we have coyotes in Belize, and it's coming down from the north. And then we start getting multiple reports from different areas. And that's one of the signs that, we're clearing some of our forests that may be very important, or that is very important.
Yeah. Now, I want to move into the jaguar conversation because I think there is a lot to be proud of in what we've been doing with jaguars. Quite a number of firsts, in fact, have taken place right here in Belize. Let's talk about the establishment of jaguar conservation and why it's such a critical part of the work that we're doing in conservation.
Yeah, so jaguars have a huge range.
Yeah.
So they're what we call an umbrella species, because if you protect the jaguars, you protect everything within the area that their range is.
Yeah.
So they've been a very useful kind of flagship or species to focus on for that reason. Obviously, we've got a very rich history in terms of jaguar conservation with the Coxcomb Basin Wildlife Sanctuary managed by Belize Audubon Society. We have one of the longest camera trapping studies, or the longest in the world, more than 16 years of camera trap data. And as a result, we probably know some of the most about jaguars in Belize, or some of the most of anywhere in the whole of their range. And their range, remember, goes from the USA all the way down to Argentina. And Belize is a very critical link in that connected chain.
Where's the largest concentration of jaguars in the country?
Probably Coxcomb, the density, is definitely really high there. But also, anywhere where there's a large connected forest, you're going to see a lot of jaguars, once there's still prey species for them to eat.
We also had the establishment of the Jaguar corridor, which is also something critical in helping to protect the species. Can you talk a bit more about that?
The Jaguar corridor, so part of it is looking at that linkage as what Lee have. So Belize itself countrywide is a link for the region.
Yeah.
And so we are establishing a link between now our north and our southern portion. Our north and our southern portion to be able to have linkage. It is important to have linkage because if you have isolated populations, then you'll not be able to have some cross genetics going on. You'll become to isolate populations, and then you'll just have pocket of populations that may not be able to survive.
Yeah.
So having that Jaguar corridor established is one, establishing a route for them to travel. Although some of that area might have roads within it, we've seen them cross roads.
Yeah.
They're very adaptable into coming across roads. It's just that we have to be careful when we're driving through.
Yeah. There are the great signs on the highway, and that you're entering into the Jaguar corridor, to remind people to take it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's one thing I'd like to add as well. That corridor is very, very under threat at the moment. It's reduced in its size since it was originally considered. This is a corridor we have to take care of. It's reduced by 65% in size since that in the last decade. There's been a major expansion of large-scale agriculture, sugarcane in the corridor. Anybody who drives that highway between Belmopan and Belize is going to have seen a major clearance just recently.
Yes.
And that is just what you can see. There's a lot that happens away from the roadside as well. You can see on Google Earth, there's a lot of that has been lost. So more than ever, we need to work out a way that we can protect that area and keep this, the massive forest area, the 1 million acre forest of the Chiquibuilmaya Mountains with the Rio Bravo Yalbac, which connects to the
It
forest
literally
in
is
Mcloughin.
becoming like a bridge,
Yeah.
Yes.
a narrow bridge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There are large clearings in the southern part of on the southern highway. To your left, to your right, there are large clearings out there, and we know for a fact that it definitely affects the lifestyle of the jaguar. Now, what are we doing with farmers? We know that they would find themselves in a position because they're trying to make their livelihood. They are actually rearing animals for to sell meat, and we know that it's only in their nature that these animals, they go where food is. They say that animals eat to live, while humans, we live to eat. What are we doing with the interaction with farmers?
There's different aspects to that. While they do live to eat, or they eat to live, they are not by nature is called to attacking a cow or eating a cow or a cattle or a sheep. They're they like their game species just like we like our game species. I say we because I'm classifying myself just
Guilty.
like everybody. But they
When
prefer.
it's in season and your permit and everything else.
Yes.
Thank you.
But they like the same things that we like, and so we are their competition when it comes to food. But when it comes to farmers, it is just sometimes you have a jaguar that we would say is a problem jaguar, is a jaguar that may be sick, and the easiest thing that requires less effort may be a stray cow or a cow on the side of the fence. We are a very small country, and our farmers tend to have pockets of little of cattle farms in forested area. Now, if you have a forest patch next to your cattle farm, there's a big risk that you're going to have some level of conflict with wildlife.
Yeah.
And it might be any wildlife. It might not just necessarily be jaguars.
Yeah.
So when it comes to farmers, we understand the situation. You have this property as land and you need some level of investment to sustain yourself. It is a livelihood for them. And so we take into some consideration that there needs to be, you can live with your wildlife.
Yeah.
There is no way that you could clear out the wildlife and you live solo. It's not, they enjoy them, they themselves enjoy having wildlife around.
Yeah.
When it comes to farmers, what we do is that, what we ask is that every attack that you have, report it. Report it, because then we're able to do some level of investigation and identify if it's actually a jaguar that attacked.
And you work with farmers. You
Yes.
help them
So
in how to protect whether it's whatever animal that they're rearing, but also with cameras and all the, because sometimes the jaguars are getting a bad rap and it's not really the jaguar that's the problem.
Exactly. So it's a level of collaboration with the farmers themselves also. It's not necessarily, you know, just not working with them. We have worked with them for years in identifying ways on how we could help them or how they could take measures into being able to have less attacks.
You guys are from Wildlife Conservation Society, and I have a question. You know, I've heard so many amazing initiatives in terms of jaguar protection. You know, from what's happening in Coxcomb to the camera traps, to establishing the corridor, to the research, to working with farmers, to the Belize Zoo and their rehabilitation. What's the collaboration that takes place between all these entities so that there's a collective effort in ensuring the protection of the species?
I think that's, for jaguars, it's been excellent in Belize. It's not always great, the levels of national collaboration, but I would say for this, it's been really good. Forest Department has an excellent relationship with the different NGO co-managers who work at the protected area levels. Forest Department's going to be assigning an officer in each district at each of its ranges to deal specifically with responding to conflict issues. They work very closely with organisations like Panthera, who are doing this camera trapping study for so long. Researchers coming in from the States like Marcella Kelly, who's got camera traps for the whole of the Mountain Pine Ridge and Rio Bravo. We've got like just this amazing amount of camera traps for the whole country. So again, like I said, we know so much, but they're not just working in isolation, they're coming together to share their data so we can feed what we find out about the way jaguars behave and their populations towards the managers, like Forest Department and protected area managers, so we could start to actually get a better idea of what we need to do to conserve them and to work out how to solve those problems where they inevitably come into conflict with humans.
How often?
To just add to that, one of the things that we did to further collaborate and have everyone inclusive, the government side and the NGO sector, was to develop the National Jaguar Working Group, whereby there are meetings where we discuss necessary, you know, issues and how to come up with that. So it's not just the government or the doing their part. We're both working together to ensure that we have good jaguar. I mean, like, I think this is one of the best model of how well we've been able to collaborate together.
And how often, I mean, we just saw this disturbing photo, I think it was last week when it came out, and there a good amount of money out there to find the individual who was responsible. My thing is, how often are we seeing human-jaguar conflict and the jaguar actually being defeated in terms of being killed? How often are we seeing these disturbing things?
Yeah, I mean, so we've got to draw a line between, so the issues that farmers have, that's what we kind of call human-jaguar conflict, whereas the one that you recently saw with the beheaded jaguar, in addition to the one year and a half ago in Belize City, that is potentially trade. So that's a very worrying development that we're seeing, whereby people are using the parts of the jaguars. Maybe it's the fangs, possibly the full head. Previously used to be the skins, but that may be less so these days. But definitely with the teeth, where there is, people are taking those to sell them into a trade. So it's where it may be a jaguar that's been killed by a farmer where the parts are then sold opportunistically, or maybe they're even being searched out intentionally to sell the parts. Those investigations are ongoing. Forest Department's working on it.
Was the jaguar that we saw, was it killed before its head was removed, or does it seem like it was only captured for that purpose?
It's hard to say, and I don't want to make a claim that I can't back up. But Forest Department is definitely working on it. They're trying to work out what's the actual driving force behind these kind of things. And if there is some sort of a trade, then it's something we need to nip in the bud before it gets out of hand. And I would again appeal to farmers, again, like Yamira said, don't sell those parts, because it can start a trade that we may get out of hand. I mean, remember the fur trade back in the 70s? Jaguar populations were decimated down to very, very little. They managed to rebound back, and that's why we have a good amount of jaguars today. But if a trade like that starts again, it could get really out of hand really quickly. It could become international, many things.
Well, I think that the question a lot of people have, and you guys will know more, is where's the market? Is it local?
It's a national market. It seems like it's a national market at the moment. There are a lot of different people, different groups in Belize that may demand. We have tourism. It may be going to those. There's been some reports of that. It doesn't seem like it's an international trade at the moment, but again, like I said, if an international trade was to develop, it would be from a fairly active national trade. The seeds of that would develop. So
see, my first assumption was international. I mean, I thought because it was in the south, maybe it's across the border into Guatemala.
Yeah.
So we're saying that there is an interest locally.
Yeah, and there have been some instances where parts have been sold into Guatemala as well. It's really hard to get an idea of exactly what's the extent of that because you're based on isolated reports. It could be the tip of an iceberg or it could be an isolated report. So this is where collaboration is really important. We all need to be talking to each other and being vigilant, really.
Now, I know you identify jaguars by its spots. Do you identify this? Have you been able to identify this jaguar from your tracking?
Panthera is looking into that right now. They're analysing their masses of databases, photos, to see whether this one is one that's been seen. But that was quite far south. It was by Dump Junction in Toledo, which is not so close to the where they have all of the camera traps. It's been harder to do camera trapping in very human-dominated landscapes because cameras can get damaged or stolen. So.
Wow. What concerns you the most? I mean, clearly, the idea of a beheaded jaguar is something that affected all of us. But for those of you who are working directly in conservation, what worries you the most about a second jaguar in 2 years?
Like Lee mentioned, it could possibly indicate that it's the beginning of a trade. Conflict with farmers is something I think we can mitigate, which we can work with farmers. When it comes to trade, it is working. It is like an organization, or it's almost like a drug trade. It has middlemen, it has suppliers, it has demanders, and having to go into that level of investigation. Belize is not, or we are very small. We're not used to seeing that. For us, our wildlife is so great. It's so diverse. We're not used to having. I mean, when we talk about jaguars and conflict, we just automatically think farmers and it's a conflict. We don't think that a trade could actually happen in Belize, or that we'll start seeing a trade. I mean, we started talking about this a few years that, you know, it could shift and it could come on this side of the world, and we have to start looking into it. And now that we're actually seeing, you know, the possibility of that happening, it is a bit worrying because it takes a lot of investigation, a lot of funding to actually look into that. So it's a level of conservation that we're going to start having to prepare ourselves for.
And as you said, the demand is either the head or the fangs.
Yeah.
Well, that's your assumption. I mean, you don't...
It seems to be, it seems to be, because this isn't just limited to Belize as well. There's very worrying signs from Bolivia, from Suriname, where there's been extensive demand for the parts of the jaguar. So that has been something that's developed to an international trade, and I think all Belizeans need to come together to protect what is a national pride of an animal, and really report when they hear of anything like this, if they see anything like this, to report that to the Forest Department. The number is 822-2079. You can call them and report any information that you have about jaguar trade.
Are you surprised by the hefty reward that's been put forward for information?
Yeah, but you remember the last time the government put up a $10,000 reward. I think what it does, it just reflects how much people care about the animal, that it's an important animal to Belize. You don't see this in other countries, you know. Things like just out of the blue, civil society generates reward money, or even less so government to put up money.
But more so, I think what is important as well is that while we're wagering this amount of money, are we finding these people?
Well, no. That's the short answer is no for that. So there's definitely a missing link. And all the money in the world won't matter unless people care about this trade
Yeah.
and about nipping it in the bud before it gets out of hand. So it's going to require people sharing what they know.
And that leads me to my last question, just kind of reminding us, why should we care about the jaguars? What impact does it make on my life here in the city? Or if I am a fisherman in Punta Gorda, you seem to have a healthy population. There's a lot of protected jaguars. The zoo has some jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I even venture into trying to help you solve this problem?
Do you want to take that first? And then
Yamira looks like to me. Yeah, punch me. You do have
no.
people who are saying this, you know?
Yeah.
They're a national symbol. I mean, they're important to the tourism industry, obviously. If we don't have any, we can't use any of them on any of the materials that we make lots of money out as a nation. So there's an economic impetus. There's a pride issue. I mean, this has been part of the culture dating back thousands of years to the Maya culture.
Yeah.
That the jaguar is a part of what makes Belize Belize. So those are some of the important parts, and I think from an ecological point of view, which is sometimes less easy to understand, but they are a keystone species, they regulate prey species, they keep the forests healthy.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They do.
And just to add to that is that, you know, we are Belizeans, and we like to boast about our beautiful wildlife.
Yes,
We go anywhere and we talk about our beautiful forests and the animals we have, and jaguars are always the top species that we talk about. And we take great pride in that.
Yeah.
If we don't have them, if we don't care about them, then what are we going to boast about?
We lose a big part of Belize.
We lose a big
indeed.
part of Belize.
And finally, for me though, if somebody is caught killing a jaguar, what happens to that person?
Yeah, if they were doing it for the purposes of trade, or if it wasn't threatening them, then they would face up to $1,000 fine or jail sentence. That fine is quite low, and that is something that the Forest Department is going to be reviewing when the Wildlife Protection Act is going to be revised and updated. That's not been changed since 1982, which is just about as old as me, which is a long
And clearly
time.
the value of what they're collecting is a lot more than 1,000.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed,
Yeah.
exactly. So the fines need to match the value of the potential trade.
To
Well-
provide some level of deterrent for it to not happen.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming in. I think the disturbing video and talking about the reward was one thing, but we do need a refresher sometimes to understand the significance of having this population and the protection of this species in our country and the part that we all play. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you too, guys.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the National Celebrations Theme and Song Competition. So stay tuned.